Hello and welcome to Staying Global While Staying Home. I'm your host, Lucy Newcomb, CEO of the Newcomb Global Group, an international management consulting firm based in Silicon Valley, specializing in global business from the inside out. We specialize in go-to-market globally, as well as global leadership development. It's my great pleasure to have our featured guest here today, Lisa Anderson, head of LMA Consulting, LMA Consulting. And she's going to be speaking with us about global supply chains and how we have learned what we have over the course of the pandemic, with perhaps some insights into navigating things in the future. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, glad to be here.
Nice to see you. Let me get started with Lisa's bio. I had the pleasure of meeting Lisa in her tangential role, but nevertheless significant, as co-executive director of the Society for the Advancement of Consulting. And I really thank you for that hard work. It's really an excellent organization. But her day job, Lisa is the founder and president of LMA Consulting Group, a firm that specializes in manufacturing strategy and end-to-end supply chain transformation to maximize customer experience, making it profitable, scalable, and increasing dramatic business growth. Whoever thought manufacturing was boring? I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Lisa has been named the top 46 most influential in supply chain by tech company SAP. And excuse me, and in the top 40 B2B tech influencers by the Arcady Group, and a top 50 ERP influencer by the firm Washington Frank. She recently published Future-Proofing Manufacturing and Supply Chain Post-COVID-19, an ebook on successfully emerging and thriving post-COVID-19. Welcome, Lisa. It's great to have you.
Great. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. We're looking forward to having you. Now that the pandemic is a year on plus, and despite, hopefully emerging into a new level as we get increasingly vaccinated, certainly here in the United States, what have we learned about global supply chains in the past year?
Well, quite a few things, actually. So one is that we thought we had addressed risk, but really it was not really addressed in reality. So meaning that when the pandemic started and China, it started, of course, in the China area, and we get, most of our product from China that's not produced in the U.S. And so we had a shortage coming from that area of the world, and we didn't necessarily have the backup supplies that we needed to have in place. So we didn't have backup suppliers. If we did, perhaps they were also located in China, or they were located somewhere in the Asian region, and there was issues associated with that. So we found out that we were very vulnerable. That's one of the many things. We're also very interconnected. So what's happening in one area of the world is going to affect us in another area of the world, even if we don't have customers or suppliers there. Because in today's supply chain, we have to worry about our customer's customer, who is our end customer, as well as our entire manufacturing network, because we could have multiple manufacturers, or we have outside processing or whatnot. And then we have our suppliers. So, we could have many layers. And that's just the key players that produce and who we ship to. But we also have connected between them. We have transportation partners, and we're going through different countries and going through ports. So there's many things that can go awry when you're very connected throughout the world, and you are only as strong as your weakest link in your supply chain, which during the pandemic meant that we had a lot of issues arise with stock outages and volatile demand as well. So I could talk about this quite a long time, but I'll let you ask some additional questions, and I'll expand upon those areas.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that key overview. A couple of things come to mind. I remember during the tsunami, about 10 years ago, I guess, we had a glimpse into this when one of the large tech companies, it might be Apple, actually had some of their key chips made in Thailand, or the key components made in Thailand. And because of the tsunami, that whole supply chain got messed up. So customers here, in Silicon Valley, we were, being crybabies about not getting our little Apple device, or I'm fairly certain that's who it was. And in the meantime, there's people who are losing their lives and their homes and so forth.
Right.
So I think we had a teeny tiny glimpse of what you're talking about in a concrete way with that. Of course, many of us will remember the early days of no toilet paper. I actually remember a restaurant here locally, in addition to, this was before eating out was not a thing, a restaurant here that's quite beloved actually, was promising 2 rolls of toilet paper if you come to dinner at 6 o'clock and make a reservation. I mean, it was a really interesting marketing.
That's funny.
It was funny.
Well, I would be happy to talk about toilet paper because actually at the beginning of the pandemic, I had probably, I don't know, 10 to 20 interviews with the media specifically about toilet paper because everybody wanted to know why were we out of toilet paper, what was going on, when we were going to get supplied. So one of the things that I would add about it relates to toilet paper is, and this explains why the global supply chain is so, complex in a way, is that, obviously we really don't need more toilet paper than we needed before the pandemic. But there is panic buying is one of the factors. And that's been happening. I mean, now it's happening with gas on the East Coast, but, with panic buying, it creates the whole supply chain to get completely out of alignment. And for example, during the global pandemic, this didn't necessarily relate to toilet paper, but the empty containers were all in the wrong place at the wrong time
Right.
because of China. And that's true for trucks. Pretty much in supply chain, you want the right inventory in the right place at the right time, at the right cost. And during the pandemic, quickly, because it was so heavily weighted to certain areas that were having issues at one time, pretty much we had all of the wrong things in the wrong places at the wrong time at the wrong cost. So it was a really big problem. But toilet paper wise, we had panic buying, which did create clearly more volume than we could bring on board, even if we were to run every plant that produces toilet paper at full out. If we even added crews, magically snapped our fingers and suddenly we could add crews, we couldn't have kept up with that kind of a volume because it was such a spike. But in addition to that, the issue here is that there's toilet paper that we use in our homes, and there's toilet paper that we use in commercial settings. And of course they're the same. It's basically the same toilet paper, but it's packaged very differently, because in commercial, you don't need pretty packages like you do in the grocery stores. So, the commercial setting, their toilet paper needs went way down because nobody was at work. And they couldn't sell the commercial setting toilet paper to grocery stores, at least in the beginning, because those supply chains were not the same. We didn't have the same partnerships, although some of the innovative grocery stores actually did start to do that. But that supply chain dried up. So there was additional volume on the personal, home toilet paper. And to your point, there was some innovative, I have a supply chain colleague who's pretty innovative, and she would made a deal with the local restaurant and picked up food and took toilet bought their toilet paper and brought them eggs because there was problems with other things. So anyway, that's how the toilet paper scenario, the supply chain is more complex than people realize, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, I think the whole shift to work from home dramatically and school from home at the same time dramatically and immediately with no prep really taught us some interesting things, both in terms of toilet paper use, and I had actually been briefed also about the commercial versus consumer use, and then of course bandwidth for handling all that internet stuff from home. I mean, all kinds of things we weren't prepared for that we can talk a little bit towards the end about, if we had known.
That's right.
But thanks for that overview. In terms of, let's go a little bit more specifically now, and in terms of your clients and partners or just your industry observations, can we talk about some specific cases? You know, the Suez Canal comes to mind, but actually even more specific about how different parties navigated some difficulties, and preferably if you have some examples of workarounds that worked, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So there was, from that point of view, the LA and Long Beach ports have been backed up since before the holidays this year, because as China came back online, you know, like I said, everything was out of alignment. So when we were buying, they were like on lockdown, and then vice versa. So the ports, and when we went on lockdown, we all started buying things at our homes. So e-commerce increased pretty dramatically. And so there was a big influx of need, and yet the ports couldn't keep up with that need, and they had folks out on COVID. So there's a big backlog at the LA and Long Beach ports coming in from Asia, and it has absolutely created havoc. They thought it was going to get caught up by the summer, but the peak season is starting. E-commerce is not slowing down. It doesn't look like it's going to get caught up until next year, if then. It may never. It's just a new environment, if you will. And then the Suez Canal came about, and the LA and Long Beach ports were already a problem. And then the Suez Canal happened, and now people were trying to get product quickly. They could fly it if it couldn't come into LA and Long Beach fast enough, or they might try different routes. And so there were some of that. There was some of that going on, depending upon like the timing and when folks needed product. And then when the Suez Canal happened, it caused even further complications, because then, you know, now we had everything stuck in the Suez Canal, and it affected different clients with product, but it also affected some of the same, because the impacts, they started going in different directions instead of the Suez Canal, or they started ordering from different people and different suppliers. So like now we have both of the big networks, LA and Long Beach, which is 40%, brings in 40% of what we use in the US, and the Suez Canal, which, you know, impacts more of the East Coast, generally speaking. Both of them are a problem. And that's just the ports, but there's, because of the volume, like all of the warehouses are full in the Inland Empire, which is it warehouses at least 40% of all the goods in the US as well. Basically, or at least those goods go through this area. And it's just been crazy. So like there's no space, the rates have gone way up. That's true for the ocean carriers as well. And what clients are looking at is what's happening to them is that their lead times are going out. So I have clients from food and beverage to machinery and equipment suppliers to building products. Oh my goodness, building products is really, really busy, because their volume has gone up substantially during this process, because everyone has decided, hey, if I'm going to be at home, I should do something to my house to improve it. So it's just gone crazy. So what's happening is that they can't get the supplies they need to produce if they're a manufacturer, or like the consumers, like they're having to wait, they have stock outs, those kinds of things. So like the lead times, for example, with one of my clients went from a week and a half to now it's 4 to 6 weeks. And that's very standard. Another client is getting product from India, and India now is having issues. But even before they had issues with COVID, the supplier already was, going from this is longer lead time items that might be 13 weeks, and it goes to double. So that's like a big problem, because while that's happening, their lead times are increasing, their volume is also increasing, because pretty much 80% of my clients, if not 90 something percent, are increasing pretty significantly in terms of volume. It could be between 20% to in some cases like 50%. Well, during the pandemic, 100%. So I mean, it's pretty wild. Some of the changes in volume that's happening now.
So let
Originally,
me
go
stop
ahead.
you right. Let me stop you right there and say, can we please go back and actually, for those of us who might not be familiar, talk just very quickly about what happened in the Suez Canal for people who might not know.
Oh, sure.
And
So
then if we can talk about a particular client, if you're not comfortable mentioning the name, maybe just the space, and how they handled such a rapid increase in volume. What did they do to cope?
sure. So the Suez Canal, a ship got stuck, and the Suez Canal, no one could get by this area of the canal, and so literally it was just a traffic jam, where they were trying for quite a while, like a week, 2 weeks, something like that, to try to get this ship unstuck or out of the way, so that we could get the rest of the ships going through. So all of these ships carry supplies to, I don't know, to either go to direct to consumer, or they could be going to manufacturers to as for needed materials so that they could run. So what was happening is that no one could get through the Suez Canal. No ships could get through. I mean, they just had to wait, or they had to go a different route. And so there are not a lot of routes. So a few of them went to a different route, which that route, so now we have congestion in other routes, or maybe they fly. If they really needed to get it there fast, they can maybe fly materials, but that's like very expensive. And you're certainly not going to fly an entire ship worth of product. So it's just created havoc. Pretty much you had to wait. One of my clients had an issue with the other port that was in the, they make motorcycle helmets. And they actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, they had an issue getting product from Vietnam as fast as they needed it to keep up with volume. So they actually tried to fly it, but for some reason at that time, it had to fly through Europe, and then it got stuck in Europe. And actually, the interesting thing is they spent all this money and coordinated efforts to fly helmets to them, and it actually got there later than the helmets that were on the ship that they were trying to get the helmets there. So basically, it's kind of goofy. What they flew got there later than the ship that they had in place. So that was one thing that obviously didn't work out. I mean, as far as the timing goes, luckily they were in decent shape. So a lot of the people who had, there are some clients who had backup sources of supply that were in other areas. Like when I was a vice president of operations, we had a supply out of Brazil, and we did keep a second source of supply that we purchased from at 20% of our volume in the US. And the private equity backers we had were not happy about this, in the sense that they didn't want this added price that we were paying. However, luckily the director of procurement, and I convinced the CEO, we were able to keep them. And then of course, something did happen to the supply in Brazil. And in our case, we were able to get the folks who were in the US to keep producing and to ramp up. But they wouldn't have done that if we weren't producing 20% of our goods there all along. So having just a backup supplier in name only doesn't do you any good. And I have some clients who had some backup sources of supply, and they were able to navigate. So actually, I do have a lawn and garden equipment client, and their volume has gone through the roof during this pandemic because, I mean, everybody was outside gardening. I mean, they couldn't go anywhere else. So, their volume has gone through the roof. They were ahead of things. I mean, they're really what it is that, are you thinking ahead or not? So they had sources of supply in China. And then a couple of years ago, just prior to the tariffs, they were ahead of things. They thought, I need to diversify a bit, and I need to, there's a lot of risks associated with producing in China. So they started moving their volume to Vietnam. And it was a good thing they did that, because that allowed them to be more diversified. And Vietnam really didn't suffer like China did with the pandemic. So they were able to keep things going. They also, not across the board, but they have some products being produced in Mexico. So they had some ability to be able to increase and look at producing more in Mexico. And they did have their Vietnam supply continue on at a much greater degree. They still have things coming from China as well, but they were able to keep up with volume, which allowed them to actually take advantage of the market opportunities, because the people they sell to, like Home Depot, Lowe's, etc., they're consumers. They want what they want when they go to the store. So because my client was able to keep up, and had some inventory available, it gave them opportunities to grow their business. So that's one way. Now, I do have a Suez Canal example as well. I have a client that had lead time issues because of the Suez Canal topic, and they, their lead times went from, like the same story, like the 1 weeks to 4 weeks as far as getting materials in place. And, it depends, like other ones went from like 12 weeks to, like 16 weeks. I mean, basically everything was expanding in terms of how long it would take. But what they did is they looked at alternative sources of materials, and they did some innovative things where they looked at, how can I do some trials on my line and utilize something that's similar. It wouldn't be necessarily the ideal material, but I'll use something similar. And they looked at several innovative strategies as to how they could move suppliers, help their supplier get materials in, and change their configuration so that they could still meet the quality specs they needed to meet, but they could utilize materials that were available or that they could get from other sources that were nearby. And that client is in the installation industry, which is also going really big these days, because it's related to building construction type materials. So I can keep going, because I have like so many clients that have examples of challenges and disruptions. But what they did is the ones that are most successful at the highest levels were either better prepared going into this pandemic and had sources of supply set up, or they did quick thinking and innovative thinking to resolve the issue, like finding it. The other thing that some of the clients did is looked at manufacturers, even could be competitors, but if you could coordinate even with a friendly competitor and find, like you have some materials they need and they have some materials you need, and or produce products that you have the capabilities to produce that you don't normally produce, so that you can help a fellow manufacturer. Those types of things happen as well during this pandemic. So it was really innovative and partnership or collaboration kind of orientation. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. You're pointing us towards our third question, but before we go there, I'm going to put you on the spot slightly, because it's okay to say no. But I'm curious, with the plethora of clients that you've had that experienced these horrendous delays, I mean, not just a little, like double and triple, are you aware of any that communicated to their customers about that and kind of how they handled the whole customer management expectation stuff around that? I'm putting you on the spot. We didn't talk about this.
No,
but I think
no,
that
it's
could be
okay.
valuable. I think it'd be quite valuable.
Well, I have to say, we didn't really talk about the demand side. And that is one of the things that my most successful clients have done that the rest haven't. So like I said, this topic we could talk about for hours, but we don't have hours. But on the demand side, the ones that were most successful were keeping track of changing customer conditions, changing customer buying patterns. And like I was working with one client that's in the food food bar business. They produce food bars for a lot of different folks that are well known, and they, one of the keys we had to do was they would sell to their customer, sold to multiple people. And so we really needed to get a handle on who their customer's customer was, so that we could, and what their situation is. So their customers, even customers. So like maybe the end customer is a Starbucks, or their end customer could be a Costco, or it could be a doctor's office. But like those are very different situations as to what could be happening during the pandemic at the customer level. So that's one thing that you just spurred on. But you said, can you ask your question again though? Because I had a comment, but I got carried away on the demand side and I don't remember your.
Oh, it was all very interesting as well. My comment was a little more specific around how your clients that have these incredible lead time delays and production delays, how they managed it with customers. I'm
That's
thinking
right.
in terms of communications, but maybe there was another way they managed it with customers so that they could kind of, keep them engaged and not have a million cancellations and keep the relationships going.
So what they did is they did get in touch with that does relate in the sense of what I was saying, because they would get in touch with their customers and then partner, like to talk to their customer's customer, if you will. It depends on, if we're talking about like only one customer out, it's obviously simpler. You can pick up the phone. But what they were doing is they were coordinating on, they were letting them know. They weren't keeping it a secret. They were saying, this is what we have. We're proactively managing to get additional materials, or it could be, it's not all about materials. It could have been, materials, ingredients, but it also could be people, because, it was also challenging to keep enough people running, especially in the beginning of COVID. And so, if they had an outbreak or something, none of my clients actually had an outbreak, but they would have one person, and then in the beginning that might shut down, the facility. So they were doing things innovative there too, where they were, working working odd hours or staggered hours, working on the weekends, doing different things so that they could keep up with the volume. But they wouldn't necessarily go into all that detail with the customer. But what they would do is they would keep them in the loop that they're proactively managing the supply disruptions, whatever they were, people, materials. And they would, tell them, like, they would work to allocate or prioritize which products they should really, which products they really needed at what time. And so the not all clients did this, but the smartest ones, the most successful ones, proactively worked with customers to prioritize what they were producing. And then they would take that information into their supply chain so that their suppliers and their suppliers would also be producing the items that were the highest priority, because there was only so much to go around in certain industries, to be sure. So they were proactively working with their customers to make that happen. Now, they also did, in some cases, increase prices and, do those types of things. It depends. During the pandemic, it's also not the best time to be increasing prices. So, I think that they prioritized the customers in an ABC way as well. So meaning, like, if they were a key customer that's been there and coordinating and partnering with them over the long run, they prioritize that customer. It's common sense, but I tell you what, a lot of this didn't happen across the spectrum.
There was a lot of panic, right? I mean,
there was a lot of panic. So
throws decision making at a curveball, to say the least. But thank you. That's really helpful. I can't wait to read your book a year from now about, my life in challenging times as an analyst and an advisor in the pandemic. I think you'll have a lot to share, and also to see the trajectory of how things have gone, because right now you're just watching everything in present time, right? It's this challenge and then this challenge and this challenge. And there's no real chance to kind of see, well, what really did work over time? Did they really keep these customers over time? Was this just a Band-Aid, or did it really sustain the relationship? So that'll be interesting to see. Well, let's wrap up with our third question. And you kind of pointed the way. The third question really talks about the silver linings. what are the things that emerged from navigating pandemic conditions in the manufacturing and supply chain area with your clients that might not have emerged? You talked about almost co-conspiracy among competitors in sharing materials. That's a really wonderful story and pretty unique. And again, the trajectory of that will be very interesting over time to see. What other silver linings have you seen? Special opportunities?
Well, definitely. Actually, there's quite a few that that I've seen coming up, and there's some key trends too. So one key trend is that clients have realized that they have not been managing risk like they should, and they really should be reevaluating their supply chain to become more resilient. Because what they've done in the past is they were interested in meeting customer expectations, but they were really setting things up they were focused on cost, really. And now they've realized that they have to be focused on cost, sure, because we need to be profitable, but more importantly, really, they have to be resilient. And so we have to do both at once. And to be resilient, it might mean that you have to change your supply chain network, maybe, and they're definitely thinking about reshoring. So some folks are bringing production closer back home, basically to the US, if you will. They're bringing it closer to their customers. So it's not even really about where corporate is, it's about where their customers are. So now many customers, there is a preponderance of customers in North America. So a lot of folks are looking at, and are definitely doing more than looking at, but they're bringing production back to North America. Now that could be Mexico if they have a high labor intensive product, because Mexico, we have a new agreement with Mexico that we can trade effectively, but they're also bringing it back to the US. They're also looking at additive manufacturing, 3D printing, so like they can, be more resilient to produce what the client needs, the customer needs, like right there, if you will. Of course, it doesn't work across the board, but it's working for more and more things. So that's one area of trends. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, thanks. I was just going to say that the 3D printing reminds me about what many of our other guests have talked about the incredible acceleration of digital transformation. Did you want to dovetail on that perhaps and talk about the impacts of digital transformation on supply chain?
Yeah, sure. So what was going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years is happening now. So things have accelerated dramatically in terms of the technology transformation. And from a manufacturing point of view, one is we're trying to get better visibility into our supply chains, where goods are and how we can be more effective. Like even the ports have a significant project going on where they can see what's on what ship and where, so they can coordinate, offloading and in a good order, if you will. But that's just one thing. Like the Internet of Things is definitely gaining steam, and also AI for sure, artificial intelligence, and the two work together, right? Because what that means is that can we be, instead of like maintaining our machines when just on a weekly basis or monthly basis, why don't we just predict like this one's getting ready to break down and deal with that? Because then we can have more capacity going to meet these largely increased volumes, and we can just pinpoint what we really need to work on. And in a way, that's what IoT and AI is gaining for us overall. It's also automating some tasks that are repetitive, so that we can better afford to reshore, as an example. So those are some of the trends happening. Now, you had asked me, there was the question about changing customer. What customers can do better? What was the question, the third question you asked? Because there was another key point that I thought I should bring up, but now I have to remember the question.
That's quite okay. It was about the silver linings involved. So since you mentioned customers, was there something involved in a closer working relationship with customers? Because I would imagine navigating all those issues about delays would create a deeper, if not more frequent, customer relationship interaction.
Yes, yeah, and it does relate to technology too, from that point of view. So yes, you're absolutely right. There are trends to collaborate more closely with both customers and suppliers, actually. And how do we bring that together so that we're all on the same page? And that relates back to how do we get good visibility as to what is coming down the pipe in the future and where things are in process. So that could relate to like ERP systems and blockchain and some of those other concepts. With that said, it also relates to a concept that doesn't necessarily require technology, but it helps in certain cases. But it's been very successful, and it's an unexpected outcome, I guess, of the pandemic. The popularity of what's called sales and operations planning, or sales inventory operations planning. It happens to be a sweet spot of my practice, and I can tell you that there are a lot of clients coming now saying, you know what, I think I need to do this. And the reason is that we have to, clients have figured out that they have to more proactively figure out demand, like what's going to be coming down their pipe. They have to be talking to customers. They have to be connected to customers, maybe figuring out what their customers need for them and getting direct consumption information. So like the more we can get on top of demand, and then the more we can predict our capacity so that we can hire and train people in advance, because it's not like you can hire somebody from manufacturing in a high skilled role and just have them productive in a week. I mean, it actually could take a year in some cases. And we have a lot of people who are starting to retire, change professions, or change companies because they've realized, like, I've decided I want a different life because of the pandemic. So there's a very big problem in terms of lack of resources. So like predicting what's going to be needed so that you can get ahead of that is really important. Storage capacity is also really important because, everybody's got like, everyone has decided. The other impact that's happened here is people used to be very concerned about inventory. And it's not like they'll just spend anything to have inventory, but it isn't the biggest problem right now. They're much more worried about meeting customer needs. So that means they have more inventory, which means that they need to better predict their storage.
Got it.
And their transportation.
Got it. Thank you so much. Well, that's a lot of silver linings. That's pretty great. Given all the challenges, it almost seems like there's some commensurate proportionality between the challenge amount and the silver lining amount, which doesn't happen
That's right.
doesn't happen often in life. So I'm really pleased to see that. Well, Lisa, thanks so much for your time and expertise. I know we have just scratched the surface of global supply chain issues, let alone manufacturing and technology. But really, thank you for what I'd call a primer. And appreciate that on your website, you offer ebooks and other educational tools for those of us who are learning how to optimize operations.
Absolutely. I have a free blog and publish frequently, as well as ebooks, and your readers or your listeners are welcome to download any of those.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate that. Next time, please join us with Margarita Correa, who is the founder and president of Bay Brazil, who will be speaking with us about navigating challenges in what, much like India and other areas, has been highly hit by the pandemic, and how that particular region is navigating, coping, and in some places succeeding. Again, I'm Lucy Newcomb, the CEO of the Newcomb Global Group. Please join us here every month for Staying Global While Staying Home, for and by global business pros in navigating pandemic challenges. Please also take a look at our blog, Not Your Mom's Global Marketplace. This month's issue is about free trade agreements, and we'll be starting our vlog shortly. Many thanks. Look forward to seeing you all, and please don't hesitate to contact us if we can help you with your own go-to-market challenges and global leadership development. Thanks very much. Bye, Lisa.
Bye. Thank you.